There's no doubt right now that airlines are suffering, with United recently announcing that they're going to furlough about 36,000 employees. And that suffering is also translating over to the airplane manufacturing industry, with Airbus recently announcing that they were going to cut back 15,000 jobs. In today's economic update, we'll talk about these two airplane manufacturers, as well as the airline industry as a whole, where that's at right now, how that's going to affect the economy, and why the individual should care. So with airline travel being lower this year than in previous years for obvious reasons, at one point it was even more than 90% below compared to previous years as far as airline travel demand. So that's a pretty significant amount. It's no wonder that airlines are having to cancel orders on airplanes. So that's translating that suffering to Boeing and Airbus and causing those layoffs. And even if airlines had to take a loss on canceling orders, it takes massive amounts of money to be able to pay the loan payments on their current airplanes. That's one of the largest costs, if not the largest cost for airlines. So of course they're going to cancel the orders on these airplanes because there's just no way for them to pay it. And I also think that this is a strong indication that airlines do not necessarily think that airline travel is going to bounce back anytime soon. So of course this decrease in demand for planes has translated into a decrease in overall production of planes. In the past recent months, there's actually been about a 40% reduction as far as the amount of airplanes that are being manufactured. So of course that translates into Airbus and Boeing having to lay off people. And they actually don't see that airplane manufacturing is going to return to normal levels until about 2022. So Airbus has already announced that they decreased their workforce by about 15%, and it may even be further cuts down the road. And that's going to be a tricky part because if you think about skilled laborers in the airline manufacturing industry, a lot of these are technical jobs that they had to, train for and took out loans for to be able to pay for that training. And so these skilled laborers, they're going to have these loans that they're not going to be able to pay when they're no longer working in the airline manufacturing industry. So how that will play out, only time will tell, but of course it's not going to play out that well. But the other important consideration to think about is someone going into the workforce right now and having to decide whether to go into training for airplane manufacturing or being an airplane engineer, or whether they want to go into some other form of industry, and train for that. They're probably going to choose that other industry because things aren't looking that great for the airplane manufacturing industry. So down the road, 3 to 5 years from now, there's actually going to be a shortage of labor, even though right now there's an excess of skilled laborers. Boeing isn't in as great of shape either because they've announced, massive amounts of cuts as well. But on top of that, Boeing actually has way more debt than, say Airbus or other airline manufacturers. So it'll be interesting to see how that debt impacts Boeing. And they were already suffering from the 737 MAX issue, but then their stock actually rallied once, Boeing announced that they're actually retesting that model of airplane. So there's some promise for that. But, it doesn't necessarily seem like too bright of a future for Boeing or any airline manufacturer for that matter. Now, here's the tricky part about the airline industry. You think about Canada, US, Europe, and China, they all have their own major airplane manufacturer. And the thing is that every area has basically their own vested interest in propping up that specific company, especially because of the jobs and just the overall protection of that country. Take the US, for example. Boeing, actually one of their largest customers for airplanes, is the military. And so if Boeing goes under and it doesn't exist anymore, not only do we lose those jobs, but on top of that, there's a lot of people out there that look at propping up Boeing as a national security issue. But the thing about it is kind of this delicate balance, because the moment that the US starts propping up Boeing and by offering low interest loans or free money or whatever kind of form of bailout, then it kind of gives this unfair competitive advantage as far as being able to sell planes at a cheaper rate than, say, Airbus would. So then, of course, France and other parts of Europe have their own vested interest in propping up Airbus, and so they begin to offer low interest rates or, free money to Airbus as well. And then, of course, then the US complains and says, Airbus has an unfair competitive advantage. Now, why does any of this matter? Well, for one, Boeing and Airbus total, they employ about 100,000 direct employees, but then you also have to consider all the indirect employees that they impact as well. You think about Boeing and all the different amount of metals they source or the different wiring or parts that they have to source. Let's just take aluminum, for example. Because Boeing is having to cut back on the amount of airplanes they're manufacturing, then there isn't that much demand anymore for that aluminum. So now the aluminum industry starts to suffer. They have to have their own layoffs as well. But there's kind of this delayed impact as well. So it kind of prolongs a recession period. The other reason this matters to the individual anyways is that airlines and airline manufacturers, they're desperate to boost up their revenue right now. So they're going to do anything they can to boost up revenue. From the airline's perspective, that may mean, increased fees, whether it's luggage fees or, start charging for anything at this point. And from the airplane manufacturer, maybe they start to cut costs somewhere. Maybe that's reducing the premium materials that they put on an airplane, or maybe that means cramming in more seats into an airplane. So that's something that the individual definitely should care about and should pay attention to over the coming year. So that's it for this economic update. If you found this video interesting, please give it a thumbs up. And if you like financial news or economic updates, I post one video every Monday and Friday. And if you like financial topic videos or personal finance videos, I post one of those every Wednesday as well as Saturday. So please hit that subscribe button, and I hope to see you in the next one.